What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another fun and exciting episode of OC and TJ. That is right. My voice is back. The cough is gone. Well, almost completely gone, but it's a lot better than it's been the last 2 weeks. It's your boy OC. Welcome back. We got Week 16 picks right in store. Week 15 was very dramatic. It was very exciting. There was a lot to talk about, and there is a lot to talk about today. But you know what? Instead of, half-assing it and trying to, struggle to talk, I'm going to stick it out and I'm going to go all the way through and I'm not going to quit, unlike De'Vondre Campbell. Anyways, let's talk about Thursday night's matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers that will take place 5 hours from tonight. It will take place in SoFi Stadium. It's the second time that these two teams will be playing against each other. The first happened in Mile High Stadium back in October when the Denver Broncos lost 23-16. They're trying to avoid the sweep. And one more win could clinch them a playoff berth. But LA can also make the playoffs as well. They need a win. They need a Dolphins loss. And they need a Colts loss for them to make it. So it's going to take a while. I don't know if they're going to make it this week. But if they win, then my guess is that they only need one more victory the following week to officially clinch a berth. So let's talk about how both of these teams played last week. One is coming off a blowout win, a sloppy blowout win, while the other is coming off a very demoralizing loss. And you know me, being the optimistic individual himself, I'm going to start with the happy side. We're going to go with the Denver Broncos. They beat the Indianapolis Colts 31-13. And to be quite honest, I mean, it was an undeserving 31-13 because that game was atrocious. Bo Nix went 20 of 33 for 130 yards with 3 interceptions, and they somehow still won the game because A, Anthony Richardson still can't throw a football, B, because Jonathan Taylor decided to pull a Deshaun Jackson and fumble the ball into the end zone for a touchback, third, because the special teams gave up a 61-yard punt return to Marvin Mims that, allowed Denver to take their first lead of the game, and 4, because Adonai Mitchell decided to throw a throwback screen to Anthony Richardson on a reverse pass, and it got picked off by Nick Bonito and ran all the way back for a touchdown. And 5, because the Indianapolis Colts completely imploded after scoring the first touchdown of the game on their opening drive. Denver, to their credit, they capitalized on their opportunities. The defense carried them from start to finish, and the offense did enough to make it a double-digit victory. But this is coming off of a bye, and 2 weeks ago, they barely pulled it out against the Cleveland Browns because Jameis Winston gifted them 2 pick sixes. So this victory just pretty much ensured that Denver is going to be a first-round exit out of the playoffs. If they lose this one against the Chargers, it's not going to completely damage their playoff hopes because they're 9-5. But at the same time, it's just you have a great defense that is first in points scored. Your special teams has been fine. Your O-line has improved. Yet somehow, some way, the turnovers are going to kill you in the long run. And if you did this against anybody other than the Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts, you probably would have gotten destroyed handedly. And you better clean up your act in this one because the Chargers have given up the second fewest points in the league, although they just gave up 40 points to Baker Mayfield and company. They were up 17-13 at halftime. Defense, after giving up a touchdown on the opening drive, they forced 2 more field goals off of Chase McLaughlin. They forced 2 turnovers. Their offense scored 2 early touchdown passes to take a 4-point lead at halftime. And I thought, okay, I'm not really completely surprised with what happened, but as long as the Chargers just stay the course and as long as they just don't get in their own way, things are going to be fine. It might be close, but at the same time, it's the victory that they need to inch closer to a playoff spot. But when both teams return to the field for the third quarter, the script completely flipped. I mean, let me read Baker Mayfield's first half numbers. 14 of 19 for 145 yards with a touchdown and an interception. He finished the game going 22 of 27 for 288 yards with 4 touchdown passes. Meaning in the second half alone, he completed all 8 of his pass attempts for 143 yards with 3 touchdown passes. That is by far the best second half performance from a quarterback that I've seen all season long. And he had a lot of help along the way. Mike Evans, he caught 9 passes for 159 yards with a couple tutties. And he's now worked to, 741 receiving yards or somewhere around that mark, which means that he only needs about 240 more receiving yards to reach the 1,000-yard mark for an 11th straight season. So I know for sure that Tampa's going to do everything they can to make sure that he reaches that milestone once again. But he also had an outstanding run game. They ran for 223 yards with Bucky Irving and Rachaad White combining for 181 of those yards. They were 9 for 15 on third down, 506 total yards of offense, and 40 points scored against the then best scoring defense in the National Football League. And Justin Herbert, he knew that he was going to have to step up in a big way because after getting bailed out by this defense, and he got bailed out by this defense against the Atlanta Falcons when they won the game, 17-13? In the second half, he completely stunk it up because he only threw for 65 yards. He finished the game going 21 of 33. He threw his second interception of the season. He finished the game with 195 yards. He got sacked 3 times, and they got outscored, 27-0. And when the backups took over on the final drive, which was in garbage time, they lost the fumble, and Tampa recovered it to be able to run the clock out. It was just an absolute nightmarish performance from start to finish. They were 0 for 6 on third down. They finished with just 206 total yards of offense. They picked up 14 first downs, 4 of them in the second half. And Tampa Bay pulled off their most convincing victory of the season. I mean, you could say that the Chargers haven't been able to beat a quality opponent all season long, but yeah, that was the victory that Tampa needed to widen the gap, in the division and keep themselves in first place. But this said a lot more about the Chargers. They're definitely guaranteed to be a first-round exit if they somehow make the playoffs because their defense can only do so much against the teams that they need to beat, and their offense is just incredibly boring when they can't run the football. I know that J.K. Dobbins is still out because of a knee sprain and that they're very thin at that position, but they didn't give Justin Herbert that big of a bag last year to be mediocre. They gave him that so we could prove to everybody why he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. And when everybody put him on their list and praised him for his generational talent, I was the first one that said, what the hell has Justin Herbert accomplished so far to be able to even be considered to be in that conversation? Because since his phenomenal rookie season where he set the rookie record for touchdown passes, he's only made the playoffs once, and that was in that 27-0 choke job against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And since that rookie season, it's been nothing but mediocrity and flashes that he could be great, but nothing that really makes you go, wow, this guy is really worth giving a long-term extension to. I know that he's definitely been the best quarterback they've had since Phillip Rivers, and he's definitely the right solution, but he has not been able to maximize his game. And heading into this game on Thursday Night Football, he needs to show the world that he is the best player on that football field. Bo Nix has a lot to prove himself because he needs to show the world that he can put the team on his back in the face of adversity. But Justin Herbert is the one with the bag. He's the reason why Jim Harbaugh was excited to take the damn job in the first place. He's the reason why the Chargers were relevant when Brandon Staley was trying to drive this team into the ground. And if he doesn't live up to the hype this time, and if he doesn't find a way to win the game for this team, then I mean, they're definitely positioned to be the 7th seed. But at the same time, unless you're the Green Bay Packers from last year, your likely fate is getting blown out. And if the playoffs ended today, I think they'd be the 6th seed in the AFC because let's see, you've got Baltimore at 5, and then you got the Chargers and the Broncos, and Chargers are at the 6th seed. And number 3 would have to be probably Pittsburgh, who the Chargers already lost to this season. So yeah, your season is not going to end well if you drop this one in humiliating fashion. But I think the Chargers will win. They're at home. I think that, listen, in the toughest of circumstances, I at least have a little more faith in Justin Herbert getting the job done than I would with Bo Nix. We know that both defenses are going to be extremely physical, but like I said, the quarterbacks are the X factor in this matchup. And while Bo Nix has a big chip on his shoulder, Justin Herbert has an even bigger one because, like I said, he's got the contract. He's got the coach he wanted. He has a good enough supporting cast to at least do enough against the best scoring defense in football. It is time to show the world that you are going to be the best player on that football field. It's not going to come down to that defense bailing you out, or Gus Edwards running for 100 yards, or Jim Harbaugh pulling some trick play out of his ass, it's got to be you. Because we know you are so much better than what you've been, not just all season long, but since that rookie year. So I'm going to give the Chargers the win in a very close game, 19-16. All right. Now we get to two Saturday games between the Kansas City Chiefs and Houston Texans, and then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens at 4:30. Let's start with the Kansas City game in Arrowhead Stadium. Patrick Mahomes, he is good to go. He is going to start in this game after suffering an ankle sprain against the Cleveland Browns in the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. And lo and behold, they finally did it. They won a stress-free game against the team they were expected to beat handedly. And listen, they were heading into upset territory because I said if the Cleveland Browns didn't turn the ball over, they definitely had a realistic shot of beating the Kansas City Chiefs. But all it took was a muff punt and an interception on the opening drives of both halves for the Chiefs to make this a 14-point game. And they scored touchdowns off of both of those turnovers, and the game only got worse from there. Jameis Winston, he threw 3 interceptions. He got sacked 5 times. They turned it over. I think they turned it over a total of 5 times. And finally, Kevin Stefanski, he saw enough. He put Jameis Winston on the bench for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who only completed, 4 passes for 18 yards, who also threw an interception. And to make matters worse, not only did Nick Chubb lose a fumble, but he broke his foot. So an already agonizing and frustrating season for this football team just turned into a complete – it just turned into a complete blowout, and it only got worse from there. Patrick Mahomes, he wasn't that much better. He completed 50% of his passes for 159 yards. In the second half, he was 7 of 19 for 47 yards. But at the same time, like, how much better could he have played when he was getting drilled in the pocket almost every single time he threw the ball? He didn't take a sack to his credit, but he got hit 12 times. And the last one was the reason why he got hurt and why his ankle rolled up and why, excuse me, and why he couldn't play in those final 5 minutes. Because, I mean, his O-line is just a wreck. He's down to, his 4th left tackle? Because they benched the rookie that they drafted in the second round. They already benched Wanya Morris, and DJ Humphries went down with some type of injury. I don't know if they're going to go back to Sua Mataya or if they're going to go back to Wanya Morris, but they're very thin at that position. Jawad Taylor, he has not lived up to the hype because if he's not getting blown up in the A gap or in some type of run formation, then he's getting penalized every freaking time. The interior is supposed to be their biggest strength, but they had their troubles against Myles Garrett and Dalvin Tomlinson and those guys. So it was trial by fire for Patrick Mahomes the entire day. And the fact that it took 5 turnovers for them to win the game by 14 points, I mean, that just shows that this team is incredibly flawed, that they are not going to win another championship. And the only reason why they could fluke their way back to the Super Bowl is because the rest of the AFC is just a complete joke. Unless Josh Allen decides to finally overcome his demons and finally beat this team, as well as Lamar Jackson, because, I mean, we know his struggles against this team, then my guess is they're probably going to BS their way to another AFC title because it's Patrick Mahomes and it's Andy Reid and they're freaking invincible and the voodoo gods are on their side. But the Houston Texans, they're coming off a great win as well. They beat the Miami Dolphins at home 20-12. It was sloppy and it didn't really make things any better. They didn't look any better than they were before the bye week, but at the same time, I mean, their defense played outstanding. They forced 4 turnovers from Tua Tagovailoa, 1 a strip sack from Will Anderson, and 3 interceptions. 1 nearly a pick six by Caden Bullock at the end of the first half, and 2 more from Derek Stingley, in which he beat Tyreek Hill to the jump twice. Twice against Tyreek Hill. I mean, the fact that you can beat it once is incredible, but another is just flat out impossible. But 2 of those turnovers led to 10 Houston points. A fake punt at the beginning of the second half allowed Houston to walk down the field on their opening drive of the period and go up 20-6. CJ Stroud threw a couple touchdown passes to Nico Collins, but he only threw for 134 yards. He got sacked 4 times. He lost a fumble. And Tua had plenty of chances to put the team on his back, but, I mean, he cost them in the end, and he was the biggest reason why they lost that football game. So Houston clinched the division by proxy because it's a complete joke. The Colts are still pretending that they can make the playoffs. The Titans, I mean, you watch Brian Callahan's post. You watch Brian Callahan's press conference about the team being soft. You'll understand like just how south things have gone. And the Jaguars are the Jaguars. Like any negative word that I can use to describe them wouldn't be good enough. It would not do that team any justice. So this game in Arrowhead Stadium is going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be really close. It's going to be ugly. I think both defenses are going to play extremely well, especially considering the fact that Mahomes is playing on a hobbled ankle. It's not the first time that we see this happen because if you remember in the playoffs a couple years ago, he tried to play through that ankle injury and he put the team on his back. He gutted it out and he led them to another Super Bowl championship. So it would have surprised me one bit if he had somewhat of a solid showing against this Houston Texans defense, because even though it has been the biggest strength for this football team, it has proven that it could fall apart at the most inopportune of times, especially when they have an offense that's just been really, really, really shaky. So I think the Chiefs will win. They're at home. I think that their defense is going to really carry this team from start to finish. And more importantly, I think it's going to give their offense a couple of opportunities for them to get points on the board that could swing the entire momentum around. So a lot of pressure is going to be on Steve Spagnuolo's unit because they're the ones that are going to have to, put all the weight on their shoulders. But I think with how strong they've been over the last 2 seasons, I think it's not impossible of a task. Giving the Kansas City Chiefs 23-20, but I think we all know that everybody else wants the Texans to win. I mean, if this was last year, I would definitely be picking the Houston Texans to win. The problem is they just haven't been able to, elevate their level of play. And I get that they've been dealing with a lot of injuries and that they've, hit some type of a wall. But, I expected a lot better. And unfortunately, I don't think their road in the playoffs is going to last very long. So hopefully things could change in this one. But, right now things are not looking that good. And by the way, I already said it. The Houston Texans already clinched their division, so they're not really have anything to play for. The Kansas City Chiefs could clinch the number 1 seed if they win this game, plus a Buffalo Bills loss. So if the Bills somehow lose to the Patriots, which is not going to happen, then the Chiefs would get the number 1 seed. If not, then race is still open. So let's move on to this next game. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens. This is definitely must-watch television. If the Pittsburgh Steelers win, they clinch the AFC North. If the Ravens win, then not only do they clinch a playoff berth, but the race is still not over. So this game will be played at M&T Bank Stadium. It's the second meeting between these two teams. If you remember the last time, Pittsburgh won the game by 2 points when their offense didn't score a touchdown, but the Ravens made too many mistakes on offense, and Justin Tucker missed 2 bad field goals, and the team completely self-imploded in the final minutes. So if there's any team that is desperate to win this game, it's Baltimore, because they're the ones that are supposed to have the 2-time MVP, one of the best running backs in football, a defense full of playmakers, an offense full of efficient talent, and, a respectable head coach in John Harbaugh. Pittsburgh, I personally believe that Mike Tomlin is better than John Harbaugh just for the simple fact that he's been able to have more success over a longer period of time, especially with all the different quarterbacks that he's had over the last few years. But at the same time, George Pickens is out. We don't know what's going to happen with TJ Watt. Minka Fitzpatrick is questionable because of an injury. If you shut down the run, your offense is one-dimensional. And defensively, if you don't have TJ Watt, then you can't generate the pressure enough to, force the stops you need to hang on for victory. I know that you got guys like Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig and Cam Hayward, and your secondary is flanked with guys like Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson. But without TJ Watt, their heart and soul of the football team, they are dramatically different when he's on the field than when he's not on it. So, yeah, this is neither team can afford to lose this game, or else, Pittsburgh is going to have to be a wild card contender. And the same will be said with Baltimore, just like they were in 2020 when Pittsburgh Steelers went 11-0 and the Ravens lost to this team twice and were forced to go to Tennessee and go to Buffalo before ultimately losing in the second round. So I don't think that this is going to be a sweep. I know that Mike Tomlin has had the head-to-head edge when both teams have been at full strength since Lamar Jackson has entered the league. But for the Baltimore Ravens to win this game, Lamar Jackson has to remind the world why he's the most dangerous quarterback in the National Football League. It's not going to come down to Derrick Henry or the defense bailing this team out again by giving up, 5 or 6 field goals to Chris Boswell. Lamar Jackson has to be the best player on this football field, just like Justin Herbert needs to be for the Los Angeles Chargers. And even more so for Lamar, because if you look at his numbers against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have been flat out atrocious. He's only beaten them one time in his career, and that was because the Pittsburgh Steelers were forced to trot out Devlin Hodges in 2019 in the fourth quarter because Mason Rudolph got belted in the helmet and suffered a concussion. So I think that if anybody is under the most pressure in this one, it is Lamar Jackson. He's got to put the team on his back and lead them to glory, because otherwise, Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to have another AFC North title. It's, Russell Wilson is going to be viewed as the king of the AFC North. And unfortunately, if the Ravens are forced to play on the road, then who knows if they even make it out of the first round, given who they go up against. If they go up against Buffalo, good luck. If it's against, the Texans or the Steelers, then they might have a better shot. But at the same time, they already lost to Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. And against Houston, we don't know what we're going to see from them, especially for the fact that they play each other on Christmas. So the race is still wide open. So I'll go with the Ravens here. It's going to be very low scoring. I don't expect either offense to play tremendous. But I think in the final minutes, if you give Lamar Jackson the ball back, like I said, he's got to step up and be the best player on that football field. It's not going to come down to Derrick Henry getting 22 to 30 touches, even though I won't be shocked if that's a strategy. It has to be Lamar Jackson facing the demons, stepping into the fire, and putting it out with his own bare hands. That's what it has to be, because he needs to show the world that he is a bad mofo, to quote the great Samuel L. Jackson. But I'll say the Ravens edge this one out 20-17. Next up, we get into Sunday's festivities. Let's start with the Los Angeles Rams and the New York Jets. That should not represent the state at all. The Los Angeles Rams are coming off their most impressive victory of the season, which is saying a lot because they beat the Buffalo Bills just last week, but that was at home. For them to go on the road in Santa Clara and not allow a single touchdown to the San Francisco 49ers, that to me was very impressive. And more importantly, it elevated them to the top of the division. I know that the 49ers are dealing with a lot of injuries and plenty of drama that we're going to get into in just a bit. But Rams offense, they only scored 12 points. They didn't score a touchdown. But what allowed them to succeed in the first half and what allowed them to get 9 points on the board in that span was because they dominated the time of possession. By playing exemplary defense and by heavily running the football, all they needed to do was just minimize mistakes and hold on to the football, and just to make sure that their 49ers defense is worn out long enough for you to unleash hell. In the first half, things were looking really rough because Matthew Stafford, completed, let me pull up my stats here. He completed 4 of 12 passes for 23 yards, and he picked up 4 first downs. And Brock Purdy was not that much better. 9 of 19 for 96 yards. There were a combined 11 punts in the first half, yet both teams did enough to score 3 points. We were in for a snooze fest, but not only did the Rams offense do enough to get points on the board, but their defense was just tremendous. And it stepped up in a big way after letting Josh Allen torch them for 6 touchdowns and over 400 yards of offense. That was just flat out exemplary. Brock Purdy, let me pull up his numbers here. 14 of 31 for 142 yards. He threw a costly interception that ended up sealing the game, and he got sacked 3 times. One on the final play of the game on some desperate pass attempt at midfield with 6 seconds left. So Rams are now in first place in the division, which actually makes a lot more sense because I like their offense a lot better. I think their defense is very opportunistic. It might not be as great as Seattle's, but I think they have a good amount of playmakers on that front. So, honestly, the Rams are heading into a very decent situation right here. A win is not going to guarantee them a playoff berth just yet, especially considering the fact that Seattle is only a game behind. The Cardinals are 7-7, and the 49ers are desperate enough to keep their season alive. But I think one more win could inch them closer to a playoff berth, especially against the New York Jets team that had to win by 7 points against the 3-11 Jacksonville Jaguars. And all I have to say is, am I supposed to be happy? I mean, congratulations. You beat the Jaguars. Great job. You're not the Tennessee Titans. Devontae Adams was sensational. He had close to 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 9 catches. He was pretty much the driving force of that Jets offense. Their defense picked off Mac Jones twice. Their special teams faked a punt. They did enough to make sure that Jacksonville didn't put the game out of reach. But really, like, this had to be your most complete game of the season. Like, wow, you're 4-10. You were able to beat a bottom feeder on the road, but what did it accomplish? Like, Aaron Rodgers is talking trash on the Pat McAfee show, and for what? Like, what was the point? Is that really what it's come to for this man? It's no wonder why his career has been extremely overrated. So, I mean, kudos to them. They won 32-25. They ensured that they wouldn't have a top 5 pick, or probably even higher considering how weak the AFC is. But, I mean, again, am I supposed to be happy or angry about this game? Like, this is what happens when both teams are terrible. Is that when you see one team do well and another come up short, it's like you just feel numb about it. You just feel apathetic. And honestly, I mean, the only thing that these teams had to risk was a high draft pick. So, you know what? I mean, kudos to the Jets, but you're still trash. So, all right. Doing a little better than the Giants, but that's not saying much. But anyways, I think in this game, the Rams are a lot more confident. They definitely know that they need to take care of business on the road to inch them closer to winning the NFC West. I think it'll be really close, considering the history between Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford. Both defenses are not that great. I think that both offenses are going to have an exemplary afternoon. And it's not even the right sentence, but the point is, you know that both teams are going to score a lot of points on the board, but I think that the Rams are going to minimize their mistakes more than I think that the Jets will, because the Jets just don't have a lot of discipline, and you just know that there's going to be that one costly play that will just turn the entire momentum of the game around. So I'll say the Rams win. I'll say they win 27-23. So, I mean, this is probably not going to be the most appealing game of the week, but I think it'll be extremely underrated because, like I said, I think both offenses are going to put a lot of points on the board because you just know that both defenses are going to be put to the test. So, all right, now we get to this NFC East battle between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders is it Northwest Stadium? Is that the new name of the Washington Commanders Stadium? Because I know they lost to the naming rights for FedEx. But you get the point. Philadelphia needs one more win to clinch the NFC East, but Washington can clinch a playoff berth with a victory as well. They need a victory, a Falcons loss, and a Rams loss for them to officially clinch a spot. I don't know if the Falcons and the Rams are going to lose, but I think that a win would at least get them closer to a playoff berth. Washington is coming off a last-second victory to the freaking New Orleans Saints. Which, I mean, I don't know how in the world it came down to a failed 2-point conversion. I mean, you're up 14-0 at halftime. Jake Haener is playing like absolutely hot garbage. Jaden Daniels threw a couple sweet touchdown passes to Terry McLaurin, even though he got sacked 5 times. This should have been a blowout. But the minute that Spencer Rattler took the football field, it was an entirely different football game. The Commanders couldn't score a single touchdown in the second half. They relied on 2 field goals from Greg Joseph to even go ahead by 13 points in the fourth quarter. In the final 15 minutes, they totaled 38 yards of offense, and they didn't score a single point. And the minute that Greg Joseph missed the field goal, it was only a 7-point game. because the Saints were able to score on all three of their drives. One of them on a double pass from Cedric Wilson to Alvin Kamara, which was an amazing catch, by the way. And by the time that Spencer Rattler got the football back, there was only a minute and 55 left on the clock, and he had an extra timeout in his pocket. I mean, that's more than enough time for him to pull out the most unexpected upset of the season. And because of the missed kick, they were able to start at their own 44-yard line. So they got tremendous field position. And at just 5 or 6 plays, they got to the 1-yard line because of a huge fourth down conversion of Foster Moreau. They spiked the ball with about a few seconds left, which was definitely what's the right word for it? Very generous, because for whatever reason the clock stopped and it gifted New Orleans a few extra seconds. But Saints go right down the field. They scored a touchdown in the final seconds of regulation with Foster Moreau once again. And instead of tying the game up to send it into overtime, Darren Rizzi, to his credit, wanted to go for 2 and go for the win. I actually agree with that, because you're 4-9 or 5-8, I should say. You literally have nothing to lose. You're already going to be eliminated from playoff contention. You have a chance to completely send the Washington Commanders into a free fall. I would go for the win. And on the 2-point conversion, Spencer Rattler, he rolled to his right. He tried to connect with Jawan Johnson on an out route. The pass was a little wide of the mark. The ball goes right through his hands. Pass falls incomplete, and the Commanders barely hung on for the victory. So Washington better be thankful that New Orleans does not have a freaking quarterback, because if this was against any other team, there's no way in hell that the Commanders are holding on for that victory. Jaden Daniels, he got sacked 8 times. No touchdowns in the second half. The only receiver that was able to have more than 50 yards and 3 catches was Terry McLaurin. They didn't do a terrible job of running the football. They held on to the ball for 41 minutes, yet they only won the game by 1 point because their defense couldn't stop Spencer Rattler and because their offense couldn't find a way to put the game away. Like that's just freaking frustrating and agonizing. Like, they went from one of the most hopeful playoff contenders just 2 months ago, and now you don't even know if they're going to even make it out of the first round. And that's been the case for a lot of teams this year. But Washington was supposed to be the biggest threat to Philadelphia, and we saw it in their first meeting at Lincoln Financial Field that they are nowhere near on the same level. Because Philadelphia, if you watched their victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they were absolutely dominant, just like we expected them to be. I mean, they heard all week that they needed to improve the passing game and that they needed to, have a huge boost on that side of the ball, because it was going to be the thing holding them back. And what does Jalen Hurts do? 25 of 32, 290 yards, 2 touchdown passes, no interceptions. A.J. Brown caught 8 passes for 110 yards. Devontae Smith caught 11 passes for 102 yards. And it was the point of emphasis in the entire first half, because the Pittsburgh Steelers knew that they were not going to let Saquon Barkley disrupt the entire game. And Jalen Hurts knew he needed to be the best player on that football field for them to win the game convincingly, because we know the defense was going to do everything they could to minimize Russell Wilson. But without Jalen Hurts having that game, it would have either been a very ugly victory or a very somber defeat. But in the second half, they succeeded with an entirely different approach, which was to completely control and dominate the time of possession. In the second half, they held onto the ball for 24 minutes. Keep in mind, there are 30 minutes in a single half. 24 minutes, and the Pittsburgh Steelers only had the ball for 6. That is impossible. And it's flat out extraordinary. I mean, their first drive, it took, about 7 minutes to kick a field goal. Their second drive, they go right down the field in 6 minutes and 33 seconds. They capped that off with a score on tush push to make it 27-13. In between that, Najee Harris botches a toss play, and the Eagles defense recovered that, which eliminated any chance of Pittsburgh making a comeback. And when the Eagles finally got the ball back on their final drive, there were 10 minutes and 29 seconds left on the clock. And when they got the ball back, they never left the field. Their final drive went 88 yards. It lasted 10 minutes and 29 seconds, and it took 21 minutes for them to successfully run out the clock. 21 plays 88 yards, nearly 10 and a half minutes. That is by far the best drive I have watched all season long. And even though it did not get any points at the end, it sealed the deal and it cemented an outstanding victory for this Philadelphia Eagles team. And it's not the first time that they've been able to beat a legitimate opponent this year. So they're definitely one of the best teams in the NFC. I'm not going to place them over Detroit just yet, because even though the Lions defense is incredibly decimated, I still think that their offense is still the best offense in the conference. And more importantly, it has allowed the Detroit Lions to just have an outstanding season. So unless these two teams match up in the playoffs, then I'll still stick with Detroit. But listen, Philadelphia, they're like right there. They're just like an inch behind, if you ask me. So I would be remiss if I didn't give any credit to the Eagles defense. They did their job. We kind of knew that they were going to play outstanding because George Pickens was out, and you knew that as long as you shut the run down, you were going to make the Steelers offense one-dimensional. But they did everything they could. They did just as great of a job themselves. 128 passing yards, 33 rushing yards to Najee Harris and Jalen Warren combined. 3 for 10 on third down, just 163 yards of offense, only 10 first downs. It was absolutely dominant. And, there's nothing else to say besides the fact that the Eagles were just simply the better team. And if it were not for a muff punt by Cooper DeJean, then the score would have been a lot worse. They forced five straight 3-and-outs to start the game, and they pretty much just set the tone from start to finish, as well as their offense. So I think that the same will happen here between the Eagles and Commanders. I think that Philadelphia just has an overall stronger team. I have a lot more faith in their offense. I sure as hell have a lot more faith in their defense. They're the better team. The only way that they can even screw this up is if Nick Sirianni decides to be a freaking idiot again. And I don't think anybody's even bringing up the fact that him and Clint Hurt, the defensive line coach, got into a little bit of a spat on the sideline because of how convincing the game was. But at the same time, it's like, whatever. I hate that altercation had to take place in public, but let's be honest. I feel like it's a little bit overblown. I feel like things will be fine for now. And I say for now because this is Nick Sirianni we're talking about. But I'll say the Eagles take care of business on the road. They lock up the division 27-16. All right, now let's get to the Atlanta Falcons versus the New York Giants. Dear God. So, I'm not even going to break down what happened in the Giants game. Another banner flew over the stadium, which is great, but they got blown out 35-14 by the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar threw 5 touchdown passes. Tommy DeVito got hurt. Tim Boyle somehow played. Things were a little interesting early on after Lamar Jackson fumbled the ball in the second play, but the minute the Giants went 3-and-out, it was like, all right, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So there's nothing else that happened that we haven't seen before. The Ravens won 35-14. They were vastly superior, and the Giants were just flat out beaten. So there's nothing else. The Falcons, on the other hand, they are coming off an ugly victory over the Las Vegas Raiders. And I mean ugly because they only won 15-9. Kirk Cousins was a freaking disaster once again. He had one big throw the entire game, which was a wide open 30-yard touchdown pass to Drake London near the end of the first quarter. And if you take that play out, here are his numbers. Let me pull them up quickly. 10 of 16 for 80 yards with an interception and 3 sacks taken. And that was despite the fact that Bijan Robinson ran for 125 yards on 22 carries. And keep in mind, the Raiders didn't even have Max Crosby. Every time that the Falcons got within striking distance, they just stalled out and either sent Younghoe Koo out of the field or they put Bradley Pinion on and put it back to Desmond Ridder. They were doing everything they could to be like, here, take it. We don't really want to win, but the Raiders' offense was just anemic. And more importantly, their special teams was an even bigger joke because Desmond Ridder threw 2 interceptions, one on a final Hail Mary pass that was just some desperation throw with 2 seconds left. Their special teams gave up 3 blocked kicks, 2 on punts, 1 partially blocked, and another on an extra point on the Raiders' only touchdown. But that was because Younghoe Koo missed another field goal with about, 5 minutes left to go. And by the time the Raiders offense finally woke up, it was just too little too late. I mean, this was just an atrocious game to watch. I mean, the Falcons, they better be thankful that this was against Desmond Ridder and the 2-12 Raiders, because any other team would have crushed them handedly. And more importantly, it was the final straw for Kirk Cousins, because if you haven't been able to keep up, he officially got benched for the rookie Michael Penix Jr., and it officially cemented this contract that Kirk Cousins got as the worst that the Falcons have ever handed out in franchise history. I did not like the fact that he got $160 million over 4 years in the first place. He was coming off a torn Achilles. You knew it was going to be a high-risk signing. And after the first 9 games, he looked promising. They were 6-3. They were in first place in the NFC South. He threw 17 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. Things were heading into the right direction, and nobody was even bringing up Michael Penix Jr. And then these last 5 games happened. 4 losses in 5 games. 1 touchdown pass, 9 picks. This move had to happen. It was the right decision. And I know people are going to say, oh, wow, the front office was so wise to draft Michael Penix in the first round. But no, it makes them look even more incompetent, because they were the ones that gave Kirk Cousins that contract in the first place. If they were that confident that they were going to take Michael Penix, they would have never handed Kirk Cousins that contract in the first place. If they had any doubts that he was going to take them to the top and get them over the hump. So, I mean, this was the move they needed to make to save their season, because they're 7-7. They're a game behind from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that they swept earlier in the year. But I'm excited to see what happens. I think the Falcons are going to win. I think this will open up the offense tremendously, because if you haven't been able to keep up with the Atlanta Falcons this year, you've noticed that in their last 5 games, their play calling has been extremely predictable. They only run to the right side, or they will only run their plays to the right side. Kirk Cousins has clearly been limited with the Achilles injury, but at the same time, nobody brought it up when they were 6-3, when they were near the top of the NFC, or when they were one of the best teams in that conference. So I think that they're just simply going to handle their business in this one. I don't expect this to be an exciting game at all, but if somehow, some way Drew Lock beats this team, then, I mean, delete the franchise, because the season's over, and it doesn't matter who they bring in or who they try to remove. There's still going to be a freaking meme if they somehow lose. So, excuse me. I'll say the Falcons win this game 24-6, because, I mean, like I said, the only thing to hope for with the Giants is that they get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. So, I mean, if the season ended today, they'd have the first overall pick. And unfortunately, I don't think they could fly another banner over MetLife unless, they decide to do it anyways, because, I mean, the Jets are playing there. So actually makes a lot more sense now that you think about it. But let's move on to this next game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. Arizona is just coming off an expected victory over the New England Patriots. There wasn't really anything to take away from it. They were just a better team. James Conner was tremendous. 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyler Murray, he only threw for 224 yards, but he didn't really need to be the hero in this game. The defense didn't give up a touchdown until it was too late, until it was garbage time. The Patriots were 0 for 6 on 3rd down, while the Cardinals were 10 for 15. Even Jonah Williams recovered a fumble in his own end zone for a touchdown. Like, that was pretty much a game-saving play, because if that didn't happen, who knows if the score would have been 30-17. The Carolina Panthers, on the other hand, they are coming off a deflating defeat to the Dallas Cowboys. Cooper Rush threw 3 touchdowns. Rico Dowdle was able to hit the 149-yard mark on about 25 touches. CeeDee Lamb torched the secondary. But what really made this game a 30-14 blowout was the fact that Bryce Young got sacked 6 times and turned the ball over 4 times. 2 picks and 2 lost fumbles. And the minute that he got strip sacked by Osa Odigizua to start the second half, Dallas got all the momentum, because on all of their drives in that span, they got points on the board, and the Carolina Panthers were pretty much just stuck in quicksand for the entire afternoon. The only reason why it was even close at halftime was because Cooper Rush botched a snap, and Jalen Coker scored an 83-yard touchdown to make it a 3-point game. So, really, if Dallas didn't get in their own way a few times, then this the score would have been a lot worse. But, I mean, Carolina's now officially eliminated from playoff contention. The Cowboys were simply just a better team. They minimized their mistakes. I don't really know why the Panthers were 3-point favorites in the first place, but, I mean, reality slapped this team back in the face eventually, so I'm not really surprised with that at all. Heading into this game in Charlotte in the Bank of America Stadium, I think the Arizona Cardinals, they're just going to pick up where they left off last week. They're going to play suffocated on. They're going to be relentless on defense. I think their offense is still going to stay in and rhythm. But something tells me that the Carolina Panthers are going to be a little bit desperate to try to make this a close and competitive game. It wouldn't shock me too much because the Arizona Cardinals, they've been pretty inconsistent all season long. You never know what you're going to get from them on any given week. Like one day they look like promising playoff contenders, and then the next they don't deserve to really make it to the wild card picture. But I still think the Cardinals will win. They have a more efficient offense. Their defense is definitely a lot better. And if the Carolina Panthers can't play perfect in all three phases, then all they're going to do is just keep falling drastically behind. So I'll say the Cardinals win a close one. I'll be nice here and say that this will be a well-fought game, but I'll say the Cardinals hang on for this one, 27-24. Okie dokie. And by the way, neither of them need a win to clinch a playoff spot, or at least the Arizona Cardinals, because I mean they still have a long way to go. Let's see how many more games that we have to go through before we wrap this show up. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so let's try to get through it as fast as possible. We got the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns. Oh boy. So I already talked about what happened with Cleveland. Jameis Winston got benched. He threw 3 more picks, got sacked 5 times, a muffed punt, and an interception on the opening drives of both halves. Pretty much gave Kansas City all the momentum. Their defense did everything they could to make Patrick Mahomes as uncomfortable in the pocket as possible. But once again, their offense let the team down. They turned it over, 5 times? Nick Chubb broke his foot. They're already eliminated from playoff contention. They're down to their 3rd starting quarterback, which just proved that they learned nothing from last year. And the reason why their record is worse is because their defense is nowhere near as dominant as it was the year before. The Cincinnati Bengals, on the other hand, I don't want to hear any of their fans saying that they're still alive in the playoff fight. That was the ugliest game that I have watched all season long. The fact that they even beat the Tennessee Titans 37-27 was alarming because any other team would have blown them out handedly. 26 combined penalties and 10 turnovers. Are you freaking kidding me? Cincinnati was responsible for 14 penalties for 110 yards. Most of them were pre-snapped by the offense. Joe Burrow turned the ball over 3 times, and that was the only reason why Tennessee even still had a shot of making it competitive. But to their credit, they were just trash. The Titans were a dumpster fire. Joe Burrow threw 3 touchdown passes. They were 10 for 13 on 3rd down. They were a near perfect, 3 for 5 in the red zone, and they scored 37 points. Congratulations. Maybe if you at least had a little more discipline, the score would have been a lot worse. But the biggest reason why Cincinnati won was one reason. It was one name only. Will Levis. Yeah, his days as a starting quarterback might be over. I mean, he threw 3 interceptions. He lost a fumble. That excuse me. Jesus, that's embarrassing. Just as atrocious as Will Levis's performance. But the point is, he turned the ball over 4 times, a lost fumble, and 3 interceptions that included a pick 6 by Geno Stone. He ended up getting benched for Mason Rudolph, and he was slightly better, but it didn't change the outcome as they turned it over 2 more times. And honestly, they got a little lucky with one of them because Jordan Battle decided to pull a Deshaun Jackson and let the ball go into the end zone before crossing the goal line, just as Jonathan Taylor did in the Denver Broncos game. And they committed 12 penalties for 110 yards. They turned the ball over 6 times. And the funny thing was that most of their flags came on the defensive side of the ball. So both teams literally evened it out. There you go. Damn, that is a hard phrase to say in a fast period of time. But the point is, Cincinnati is somehow still alive. They're 6-8. Yeah, like I said, if this was against any other team, they would have gotten freaking destroyed because the Titans are just an absolute joke. Who knows if Brian Callahan last year? I just don't like the politics. I really don't like the politics of coaches only lasting 1 year unless it's completely toxic. But, I mean, they don't have a quarterback. Their offense has been extremely underwhelming. Their defense has literally gone through multiple fire sales, not just this season, but in the offseason, in last offseason. And they're 3-11 for a reason. It's because they're just a freaking clown show right now. And I knew they weren't going to make the playoffs anyways, but I did not think that they would be at this low of a point. But heading into this game between the Bengals and the Browns, I think that Cincinnati should win this game easily. I mean, we know what Dorian Thompson-Robinson is. He's okay at his best, but that's all you're going to get from him. And here's the thing. If they turn it over as many times as they did last week, then Cincinnati is just going to make this, a long afternoon. It's just, I don't think this is going to be a close game. I'll say the Bengals win. They're at home. And, I mean, Joe Burrow already beat this Browns defense in Cleveland. So I feel like if you're able to overcome those defense, then I think that you should do enough to get this team a win at your own building. So I'll say the Bengals win this one 30-10. I mean, I don't really think anybody's really going to pay attention to it because, yes, Cincinnati is technically still alive, but they could realistically be eliminated if certain teams win and Cincinnati just, it's too late for Cincinnati to keep up. So that's my point of view on it. This game, we got the Indianapolis Colts versus the Tennessee Titans. I mean, I already pretty much broke down what happened between both of them, especially with just Tennessee just about a few minutes ago. The Indianapolis Colts, for any fans that somehow still believe that they could have made the playoffs, that loss to the Denver Broncos easily sealed their chances. They were up 13-7 at halftime. Their offense scored on the first drive of the game. Their defense picked off Bo Nix 3 times, and yet they still imploded, mainly due to the fact that Jonathan Taylor decided to pull it to Deshaun Jackson by nearly having a 40-yard touchdown to go up 19-7, only for him to drop the ball in the end zone before crossing the goal line, and it resulted in a touchback for the Denver Broncos. And the minute that Marvin Mims had that 61-yard punt return to give the Denver Broncos their first lead of the game, they just completely fell apart. And I think that failed trick play by Adonai Mitchell it really sealed their chances there. They're not technically eliminated from playoff contention just yet, but yeah, that loss might have been the final straw. And unfortunately, they're going to have to answer a lot of long questions in the offseason because, I mean, who knows if Anthony Richardson is going to be the future for 2025. I don't think so because he cannot stay consistent if his life depended on it. Jonathan Taylor is really the only backbone of this offense. Their defense has major flaws. Shane Steichen, I like him as a head coach, and I think Chris Ballard has done a good job of trying to keep this roster competitive. But at the same time, if they just keep spinning the tires and just not go anywhere and not elevate their level of play, then they might be walking out the door after the 2025 season. So, yeah, this game, if they lose this one, it's really over. I don't really know how this game is going to go, to be quite honest. I know that both offenses are not going to play well. I'll guarantee you that. But the thing is, it's like you got a team with no quarterback, and then you have another team with no quarterback. I mean, I'll pick the Colts just because they're at home, and I trust Jonathan Taylor more than I do Tony Pollard. But at the same time, it's like, how much fight do these teams have left in them? I mean, the Titans are 3-11. They're completely garbage. And the Indianapolis Colts, like I said, they're trying to pretend that they could still make the playoffs, but they're 6-8, and they're one more loss away from officially being eliminated. And, I mean, considering the rest of their schedule, it's just great. You got the Titans twice in the Giants. Great. You could realistically win out the rest of your season, but what are you really going to accomplish? That you're mediocre? Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. So I'll say the Colts win 13-10. It's not going to be a great game to watch. If Spiro Dinas is on the call, I will not be surprised because, unfortunately, that's what CBS has done to him. They just give him the sloppiest games that you could ever ask for, and there's no reward at the end as a result. All right, moving on. We got the Detroit Lions versus the Chicago Bears. The Detroit Lions, they already clinched a playoff berth, but they still have a long way to go when it comes to clinching the division. When it comes to this game, though, they should definitely take care of business, even with their defense as decimated as it has been all season long. They're without 2 starting pass rushers, 4 starting linebackers, and their best quarterback. And on your offense, you're without David Montgomery. I mean, it's no wonder why they lost 48-42 to the Bills, because their offense got the ball to start the game, and they punted it twice, which allowed the Bills to take a 14-0 lead to start the game. And from that point on, it was keep up from start to finish. And the reason why they were down by as much as 21 points and then eventually 17 in the fourth quarter was because Amon-Ra St. Brown had a costly fumble that allowed the Bills to go up 35-14. And then with 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, Dan Campbell elects to go with an onside kick. Matt Collins easily catches it out of the air and then runs it all the way to the 5-yard line, which allowed the Bills to go up by 17 points. And I get that the Lions I'm sorry. Jesus Christ, I am embarrassing myself right now. But anyways, even though the Lions did everything they could to make it a 6-point game, the effort was too little too late, and their final touchdown came with about 12 seconds left. So I get that Jared Goff threw for 495 yards and 5 touchdown passes. I know that Amon-Ra St. Brown had the game of his life, and Sam Laporta was able to reach over 110 yards. But their defense is wrecked. Their offense played from behind the entire afternoon. And if they didn't punt on their first 2 drives, and if they didn't set themselves back even further, then there might have been a chance for Detroit to barely escape with another victory at home. But I think they'll be able to bounce back, especially against a Bears team that's just flat out dead. I mean, all you had to see was Caleb Williams' face on the bench, literally him leaning over on his right side, just absolutely defeated and crushed because they've lost 8 straight. They're officially eliminated from playoff contention. And on Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings, they just got their hearts ripped out. I mean, first drive of the game, they go for it on 4th and 1 at their own 39-yard line. They run a toss play to DeAndre Swift that gets stuffed. Their next possession, they're able to get into field goal range, only for Jonathan Grenard to have a huge strip sack to allow the Vikings to go ahead 10-0. And even though they were only down 13 at the half, mainly due to the fact that Sam Darnold threw an interception in field goal range, they failed on another they failed on another 4th down attempt to set themselves back even further. And when they had a chance to make it a 1-score game to begin the second half at the 1-yard line, 2 penalties pushed them back 15 yards. The drive stalls out. They're forced to kick a field goal. And from that point on, I mean, they had no chance of coming back. I mean, the only reason why they even scored a touchdown was because of a blocked punt with 5 minutes left to go when they were down 30-6. And the Vikings offense wasn't that great on Monday night, but they still were able to score on 3 of their final 4 drives to make this a blowout. And they made the least amount of mistakes, and they showed a lot more efficiency and confidence than the Chicago Bears ever did. So heading into this game at Soldier Field, I am not going to be surprised if this turns into a close and competitive ball game, just for the simple fact that the Lions are dealing with way too many injuries. But listen, if there's any time for Jared Goff to get his 2nd career victory at Soldier Field, it's this one, because the Bears defense has not lived up to expectations in their 8-game losing streak. Their offense just continues to spin the tires, and they get off to the worst starts possible in the first half. And as long as they get a sizable and comfortable lead against this Chicago Bears team, then everything else should take care of itself. So I don't expect the Detroit defense to play extremely well, but listen, as long as you force about what? Let me get a complete estimation. If you could get at least 3 stops to start the game, and if the offense could get at least 3 scores on the board, then that will be enough. Hopefully it's not like what happened in the first meeting at Ford Field on Thanksgiving, where terrible clock management cost the Bears a potential victory. But I think the Lions will make this a little more of a sizable game. I'll say they win 31-20. And that's if the Lions defense decides to show up. If not, then I would not be surprised if this comes down to a field goal or a walk-off touchdown. So, anyways, let's get to the next game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. Already talked what happened on Minnesota's perspective, so let's just transition in to the Seattle Seahawks. They got completely crushed by the Green Bay Packers on their home field, 30-13. And I know people are going to say, well, if Geno Smith didn't get hurt, they might have had a chance of coming back. But before he got hurt with a knee injury in the third quarter, he only threw for 149 yards. He had an interception, and he got sacked 3 times. The defense gave up 4 straight scores on the first 4 drives of the first half to trail 20-3 at the break. And to their credit, they tightened up their defense. They shut Josh Jacobs down. After letting him run for 110 yards in just the first half alone. But at the same time, the minute Geno went down and Sam Howell was forced to take the field, the outcome was already decided. Sam Howell completed 5 of 14 passes for 24 yards. He threw an interception when he really should have had 3, and he got sacked 4 times. And that interception he threw set up the knockout touchdown pass from Jordan Love to Romeo Doubs that allowed Green Bay to blow this team out 30-13. So I think that if Geno Smith didn't get hurt, then it would have been at least a closer game. But at the same time, I think, damn, I use that phrase a lot. But you know what I mean. I think that, listen, the Seahawks offense, they got off to a horrible start at the beginning. Their defense was somehow punked from start to finish. They got run off the field by Josh Jacobs in the first half, and they let up the final score that ultimately sealed the deal. And I mean, they had 108 penalty yards on 5 penalties, on just 5 flags. So the discipline was not where it needed to be. The focus was absolutely not there. But if Geno Smith is good to go in this game, then they're going to need all hands on deck, because the last thing you could do is give the Minnesota Vikings any opportunities to blow this game out of the park, because the Vikings are just so much more complete on both sides of the ball. They have an outstanding defense. Their offense has turned world since Sam Darnold has been the starting quarterback. And like I said, all it takes is one mistake for them to take all the momentum in this game. So I think it'll be really close. I think even with Geno Smith playing on one leg, he's going to do whatever it takes to make this a close game. Like I said, one tiny mistake, one slight setback is going to determine the outcome of this game. I have a lot more faith in Minnesota because they've shown a lot more consistency. And more importantly, I have a lot more faith in their offense, which is saying a lot, because Sam Darnold and Geno Smith, they're literally in the same tier. You know, they're 2 quarterbacks that, you know, got off to the worst starts in their careers. But whenever they found their homes and whenever they got the confidence that they needed to put the teams on their back, they shined bright, and you've seen the difference. So I'll say the Vikings win this game 24-20, and I don't expect both offenses to play extremely great, but like I said, if Sam Darnold gets the ball back in the final minutes, then I think that the world better watch out, because, I mean, that offense is very hard to slow down, even for a Seattle Seahawks defense that's been better since the bye week, with the exception of last Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. So we'll see what happens there. Next up, we got the Bills and the Patriots. I mean, I'm not even going to waste my time here. The Bills are going to win. This is going to be a blowout. Patriots are freaking horrible. They're 3-11. Their offense is anemic. Their defense is horrible. Jerod Mayo, he's throwing his players and coaches under the bus when he specified that he wasn't going to call out certain names during his post-game media session. Yeah, Buffalo's just a vastly superior football team. Josh Allen, he's the clear-cut choice for the MVP as of right now, because obviously that race is definitely fluid. You know, their offense has been absolutely unstoppable over the last 2 weeks. Their defense has been wrecked with a few injuries, but at the same time, they've definitely done their part they did their part last week to ensure that they played from ahead against the Detroit Lions. So I think against this bottom feeder like the Patriots, Buffalo is just going to bounce back. They're going to take care of business. They're at home. And the only thing that the Patriots have to be happy about, besides the fact that they have a third overall pick, is that they're wearing silver pants again. I'm not exaggerating. The uniform choices is the only thing that New England has to look forward to at this point. So Bills win 37-6 in Orchard Park. And let's see. They already clinched the division. So really, it really just comes down to the number one seed for them. So one more victory could itch them closer to that spot. So, all right, let's see how many more we got. We got 4 more games left. Let's talk about the Raiders and the Jaguars. Dear God. Yeah, Raiders are pathetic. The Jaguars are just as garbage. Jaguars actually both of them actually had plenty of chances to beat the Falcons and the Jets, but the Falcons let 3 blocked kicks and 3 turnovers and a safety completely set them back and lose by 6 points. The Jaguars, they had plenty of chances to put the game out of reach, but they only scored 2 touchdowns on 9 drives. Mac Jones threw 2 picks. Their defense got torched by Devontae Adams, and their special teams let up a fake punt that gave the Jets even more life and even more momentum. So this is going to be a tank bowl of tank bowls. This is going to be an ugly game to watch. I am not looking forward to this at all. And if there's any way for the Jacksonville Jaguars to get back into the top 5 in the draft order, it's to lose this football game, because neither team has any realistic expectations of doing well this season. And to be quite honest, if I'm Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, I am just praying to God that I'm not sent to Vegas to die, because, yeah, this team has been irrelevant over the last 20 years. And I don't know if their presence alone is going to change the fortunes, because they need a lot more than just a quarterback for them to be respectable again. But I digress. I think the Raiders will win 24-10, because even without Max Crosby last week, I still think their defense played extremely well against Kirk Cousins. They only held him to 111 yards? If I'm not mistaken, let me pull this up. Yeah, 112 yards. And if you take out that wide open touchdown pass to Drake London, that's 82. And they picked him off once. They sacked him 3 times. And the Jaguars offense is nowhere near different, consider when you compare it to the Falcons over the last 5 weeks. Because Mac Jones, even though he did decent last week, he couldn't put them over the top. There were a lot of missed throws. There were the 2 interceptions that sealed the deal. And more importantly, it's just, you kind of know what you're getting from him. It's just, there are games where he's capable of playing well, but at the same time, it's like, God, there needs to be a counter on that bottom header for every time I say that phrase. But anyways, you just know that there are going to be performances where he'll just stick it up. And I know that this offense is incredibly injured and that their defense is abysmal, but you know what you're getting from the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's why I have just a little more faith in the Raiders, especially if Aiden O'Connell decides to come back, because the fact that it was only a bone bruise and that he actually had a chance of playing in this game, it's honestly a little bit remarkable. I know that their season is already lost to the wayside, but watching that injury firsthand and watching it live, I did not think that he was going to play the final 3 games of the season. And we don't know. His status still remains up in the air. So we'll see what happens. All right. In the last game of the Sunday afternoon window, we have the San Francisco 49ers and the Miami Dolphins. Both teams are in the same situation. They are desperate for another win to at least salvage their season and will at least end it on a high note if they do get eliminated from playoff contention. San Francisco 49ers, though, they are in a worse situation. And it's not just due to the fact that they lost to the Rams 12-6. I already brought up why they lost. Their offense was pathetic and their defense got worn out of the second half. But De'Vondre Campbell in the third quarter quit on his football team by walking into the locker room, by refusing to play in the game because he didn't feel like it. And George Kittle said it best when he said that he did not want to be around a guy like that anymore. That was just flat out weak, and it was flat out cowardly. Let me just set the context and perspective to understand what happened here. So in the offseason, De'Vondre Campbell signed a 1-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers as an insurance pickup because Drake Greenlaw tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl, who was one of their best players and their starting linebacker next to Fred Warner. So Campbell got the nod. He got the start. They put Drake Greenlaw on the PUP list so he could recover from that injury. And leading up to this game against the Rams, they were ecstatic to announce that Drake Greenlaw was able to return. So they gave him his starting job back. And it obviously upset Campbell, which I can understand. It sucks losing your job in a situation like that. But Greenlaw comes back, has, 10 tackles in the first half. He is the biggest reason why the 49ers were in that game to begin with in that whole first half. But in the second half, he does not play. Drake Greenlaw does it because he's trying to manage that injury and not re-aggravate it or not tear it again. And instead of Campbell playing, they are forced to play a couple of backups next to Fred Warner. And I didn't even notice that De'Vondre Campbell walked into the locker room because, all I knew was that Drake Greenlaw was on the field. But after the game, I saw the post-game pressers. I saw, Kyle Shanahan's comments. I read what Charvarius Ward had to say. I read what George Kittle had to talk about. And I just knew that De'Vondre Campbell was not going to be on this team any longer. So my point of view is that De'Vondre Campbell was completely in the wrong because he knew what the situation was. He knew that he was probably going to lose his starting job the minute that Drake Greenlaw came back. And the fact that he let his emotions get the best of him over the interest of his team when they needed him the most, that was straight up weak. It was straight up disgraceful. And worst of all, it might be the end of your NFL career because there is not going to be a team that will look at him and say, you know what? That is a guy that I want in my locker room because I know that he can walk out if he is somehow not satisfied with the situation that he is in. So it was more than deserving that he got suspended rather than released because the last thing the 49ers could have done was to reward him by paying out the remainder of his contract. Like, no. You're not getting any pay out of this. Everything in this locker room that with your name on it, it's getting stripped. And more importantly, you are not getting compensated. So get the F out and don't ever come back again. So more than deserving. And honestly, it's just been a dramatic soap opera for this football team. The injuries have plagued them. You had this incident. Charvarius Ward and Trent Williams, they're dealing with tragic, off the field situations. And we're definitely wishing them nothing but the best because, it's just flat out awful what they're going through right now. And we should not hold that against them one bit. But at the same time, you're coming off another Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. You're 6-8 right now. One more loss can officially eliminate you from the playoffs. And you're just hoping that winning this game would, keep your season alive. Maybe give yourselves an outside chance. So, yeah, that's just depressing. And the Dolphins, 3-15 against teams over 500. That's all you really need to know. Tua was flat out awful. He turned the ball over 4 times. 10 of them led to Houston points. Maybe more if you count the strip sack by Will Anderson. But the point is that, those turnovers completely cost you the game. Jesus, that was freaking insane. The defense did their best to give your offense the ball back in the second half. It took a fake punt for the Houston Texans to even get a touchdown on the board in that span. And I get that they had their issues, but at the same time, 4 sacks, 134 passing yards, and a fumble recovery. That'll work. If you told me those numbers, I would say that would be enough to give your offense a shot. But 3 interceptions and another lost fumble completely sealed the deal, and it might have ended your playoff, and it might have ended your season. Not officially because you're still 6-8 and you're somehow still alive along with the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals, but one more loss at home, and that would be all that she would write. I think the 49ers will win, and I know that they're dealing with, and I get that they're still decimated. They're down to their 5th running back now. And I'm actually really happy that Nick Bosa was able to come back because I did not think he was going to be able to return for that oblique injury. But I think I have a lot more faith in their offense. I think listen, their defense will have their issues against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but listen, with Dre Greenlaw back in the lineup and with Nick Bosa ramping back up to speed, I think that, they'll have at least enough juice to try to pick them over the top. But to be quite honest, not only does Brock Purdy have to step it up, but Deebo Samuel has to clean up his act. I mean, before the game on Thursday night, he's complaining that he's not getting the ball and that his production hasn't been what he's expected. And then he goes out and has 7 targets, only 3 catches for 16 yards, including a huge drop that could have given the 49ers all the momentum they needed to win that football game. And I'm just like, dude, you got to be able to back it. You got to back your talk up if you're going to talk that smack. I get he did it last week last year, I should say, when he torched the Philadelphia Eagles defense, but he's going to need a similar performance like that for the 49ers to somehow stay alive. So I think the 49ers will win in a very close game, 24-21. I have more faith in Brock Purdy than I do with Tua, but I could be wrong. Maybe Miami will finally, live up to their potential for once. But yeah, if these issues continue on for the next year, then Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, their butts are going to be on the hot seat, and they might be shown out the door, which is unfortunate because I really like both of them, but they have not been able to evolve. So, all right, we got 2 more games on the docket. We got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. So Dallas is still 6-8, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're 8-6. They're coming off impressive victories on the road. But Baker Mayfield did not practice last week because of a knee injury. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Because if he's not healthy, then I don't think that the Buccaneers are going to win. So I'll put it to you this way. If Baker is somehow ruled out, then I think the Cowboys will win 23-10. If Baker is somehow good, if he decides to give it a go, and if he decides to gut it out, then I think he'll win. Then I think they will win 23-20. Because even though the Dallas defense has been substantially better since Micah Parsons has returned to the lineup with that ankle sprain, I think that, listen, Tampa has proven that they are capable of shutting down average offenses. Tampa's offense has the best receiver on the football field with Mike Evans, which is saying a lot because Dallas has CeeDee Lamb. They have a more reliable running attack, and more importantly, I trust Baker Mayfield 10 times more than I do with Cooper Rush, who has shown that he is not a guy that is going to completely carry you into the playoffs. And I know that Dallas is still deluding themselves into the fact that they still have a shot of fluking themselves into the 7th seed, but you got Tampa, you got Philly on the road, and you got Washington at home. So what you're bound to lose at least one of those games. So sorry, not sorry. But like I said, if Baker's good, Bucs win in a very close game, 23-20, because I think both defenses are going to be put to the test. If Baker somehow, some way can't go, then this should be an easy win for the Cowboys, because I think we all know that Kyle Trask is not going to be the biggest reason why the Buccaneers will win. They would need Cooper Rush to completely implode, or for Bucky Irving to run for 200 yards for Tampa to win that game. So, all right, last but not least, we got the Green Bay Packers versus New Orleans Saints, a Monday night showdown that could end up in an upset, considering that the Saints were a failed 2-point conversion away from actually upsetting the Washington Commanders. My guess is that Spencer Rattler is going to get the start, and rightfully so, because Jake Haener was absolutely trash in the first half. 4 of 10 passes for 49 yards, two first downs, and 38 total yards of offense. And then the minute Spencer Rattler takes over, he turns out to be the biggest spark that they needed. They scored on all their drives. The defense sacked Jaden Daniels 8 times, held him to just 2 field goals in the second half, and unfortunately, that final play decided it, and it turned out that the first half was too big of a hole for that team to climb out of. And the Packers, they're coming off a very impressive victory against the Seattle Seahawks at Seattle. I mean, Josh Jacobs was a menace in the first half. He had 110 yards on 17 touches. Jordan Love was efficient. Their defense was relentless. They had 7 total sacks. They had 2 interceptions. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for Geno Smith going down, then I think the Seahawks might have had a chance of at least making this a close game, because the Packers offense fizzled out in that second half. I mean, Josh Jacobs was held to just 25 total yards from scrimmage. They stalled out on 6 of their 8 drives, and it took a Sam Howell interception for them to come up with a knockout touchdown from Jordan Love to Romeo Doubs to make it a 30-13 game. So, I mean, give the Green Bay Packers a lot of credit for minimizing their mistakes and capitalizing on their opportunities, but I think that this one could definitely be a little bit of a trap game. I think the Packers will win because their offense is more dynamic, and I think that, their defense should do enough against the Saints offense that might not have Alvin Kamara, and that's going to be without their 2 best receivers, and that whose offensive line has not lived up to expectations. But listen, against that New Orleans Saints defense that's been a little better over the last few weeks, anything can happen. So I'll say the Packers win 27-13, but I would not be surprised if this turns into a scrappy first half that somehow gets out of hand as the game progresses. So it'll probably be 13-6 by halftime, but I think if the Green Bay Packers just get into a little bit of a rhythm, then they'll do enough to put the game out of reach. So, all right, that just about does it. Nobody is on a bye, so there's nobody else that I left out. Is there any other team that I didn't mention? Oh yeah, the Green Bay Packers. One more win will get them a playoff. We'll get them a playoff spot. So there you go. Sorry, I forgot to bring that point up. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. We'll see you next week, just before Christmas, for another Picks episode. Love you all so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Peace, everyone. Love y'all.